Hi, I'm Brendan Moore with Grace Lutheran Church, and I'm so excited that you found our message today because at Grace Lutheran Church, we are all about connecting people just like you to Jesus. And part of that is growing more and more into the image of Jesus. And so we are so glad you found us today because we're talking about growing in our relationships. We know that the relationships that God has placed us in is one of the main ways that we reflect Jesus to the world around us. And so growing in relationships is some of the best ways we can grow more into the image of God. And so we're spending some time in this series right now, You plus Me equals We, on growing our relational skills, helping to strengthen the connections we have with the people closest to us. So we're going to learn from God all about how we can be better at relationships. We're going to learn some super practical ways that we can connect better to the people closest to us in our lives each and every day. What can you do right now to strengthen that connection? We're going to be talking about that in today's message. So I'm so glad you found us. I'm so glad you're taking the chance to grow in your relational abilities. And if you're interested in checking out the rest of the series or more content that focuses on Jesus Christ and how He impacts your life today and tomorrow for the immediate future and your eternal future, I'd love to invite you to check out our website, Grace Lutheran, Winter Haven, Florida, glwh.org, or check us out on YouTube at Grace Lutheran, Winter Haven, Florida. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss this series, You plus Me equals Me, strengthening our connections with the people closest to us, or any other gospel-centered content that focuses on God's good news for you in Jesus Christ. We hope you'll join us online on those two ways, and we hope this message speaks to you and helps you connect better.
I get the joy and the pleasure today of talking to you about forgiveness. Forgiving other people who sin against you, forgiving people who hurt you, forgiving people who do wrong against you. Just a light, casual, easy conversation. Easy thing to talk about, easy thing to do, right? Does anybody actually feel like you're just really good at forgiving people? Anybody just comes naturally to you? You don't have a problem handing over the things that hurt you, getting past the things that people do against you. Anybody do that well? Anybody really good at it? I can give you the mic and you can talk about this today. It's hard. It is so hard to forgive people. And really when I talk to other Christians, it's usually one of the top two things that they say they need to get better at, that they want to improve at. They want to get better at forgiving people. They want to get better at forgiveness. They also say that they want to get better at patience. So we're going to talk about one of those today. We're talking about forgiveness. Because we know that we need to be good at it. We should be good at it. We know that it's important. But it's so hard. And why is it so hard? Why is it hard to forgive people who do us wrong? Why is it even harder to actually mean forgiveness? Why is it hard to say the words, I forgive you? And why is it even harder to mean them with our hearts? Why is it really hard to mean them with our feelings and our emotions? We know that it's important. We know we should do it. We know that God tells us to do it. And yet, it's hard. Why is that? I think there's a couple reasons. If there's something that needs to be forgiven, then it means that, obviously, somebody has either done something to you that they shouldn't have done, or it means that someone has neglected to do something to you or for you that they should have done. And in either of those instances, that causes us pain. And when someone causes us pain and we need to forgive them, forgiveness involves being vulnerable enough to admit that we've been harmed. It means admitting to ourselves and to other people that they have hurt us, and that is vulnerable. And for some people, that kind of vulnerability is really hard to admit. It's hard to admit, hey, you hurt me, and that's the first step in forgiving them. But also, forgiving somebody means to refuse to let that hurt and that grief and that sin and that neglect stand in the way of your relationship with that person. Forgiving someone means refusing to let that sin stand in the way of your relationship with that person. Forgiving someone who hurts us, it gives up the right to get revenge on that person for whatever it is they did to you. And it means we can't emotionally or relationally punish that person for the way that they hurt us. We can't inflict that damage back on them. And when we give up that kind of power to do those kinds of things, it feels like we're giving that over to them. And they don't deserve to have our power because they already inflicted power over us. And so we don't want to hand that over to somebody else. And it doesn't seem fair. Forgiveness is hard because the full burden of forgiveness, the whole responsibility of forgiving falls on the person who's been hurt. The burden is on the victim here. The person who needs to be forgiven, they can't contribute to the forgiveness. They can't help the person who does the forgiving to do the forgiving. That they're totally absent. And so all of the work falls on the person who's been wronged. They have to endure this inner struggle, this inner turmoil of moving past their desire for revenge and for repercussions for whatever they did. Even though they were the ones who had something wrong done to them, they still have to do the work in the forgiving. So that they get the damage, but they also have to do the work. That's why forgiveness is hard. Because forgiveness is lopsided. The person who received the hurt has the most to do. And so it's easy to convince ourselves that refusing to forgive somebody, that not speaking forgiveness, that it means that I'm enacting some kind of justice on them. They don't deserve that. They don't deserve the forgiveness, and so I'm going to withhold it from them. And so I'm just being fair. Somebody who hit me, I got to hit him back. And on top of that, I'm also protecting myself, wrapping myself in some kind of cocoon to protect myself from getting even more hurt. I'm shielding myself from the uncomfortable vulnerability of admitting that I've been hurt. And I think I'm preventing myself from getting hurt again by this person in the future. But I think refusing to forgive someone doesn't prevent hurt at all. It actually promises that you're going to get hurt. It doesn't make it impossible to get hurt when we refuse to forgive. It makes it inevitable that we'll get hurt by that person. You see, when we refuse to forgive people, we set the course of the relationship toward death. And it hurts when relationships end. Even if it means the end of a relationship with somebody who's hurt you and sinned against you and caused us pain, the end of that relationship is still going to hurt. And refusing to forgive people guarantees that the relationship ends. And it guarantees that you're going to feel the pain from the end of that relationship. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to practice forgiveness. Because everyone that we are in any kind of relationship with is eventually going to sin against us. They're eventually going to hurt us, and they will eventually need our forgiveness because they aren't perfect. They're going to mess up, and they're going to sin against us. And refusing to forgive people who sin against us only deteriorates the relationship until it dies. And so if that's the case, then we'll just be forced to hop around from one relationship to another, to another, to another, or from one friend to another, from one family member to another, only sticking around as long as they don't sin against us, as long as they don't hurt us, and we're not staying permanently because they're eventually going to. And that's lonely. And loneliness is painful. But there's also something inside of me that happens when I withhold forgiveness. There's something that happens to my relationship with God when I don't forgive other people. See, refusing to forgive others, it reinforces this idea that I have in my head that some things just can't be forgiven. It validates the idea that there are certain things that are by their nature unable to be forgiven. They're unforgivable. And if there are certain things that I can't forgive and I won't forgive when they're done against me, then how can I expect God to forgive me of that? Because I've sinned against God so much more often, so much more severely than anyone has sinned against me. And if I can't forgive them, then how can I expect God to forgive me? And if that's the case, then I won't bring my sin to God. I won't confess my sin to God because I don't expect that He'll forgive it. And I'll stay away from God. I'll hide from Him. And then my relationship with God will deteriorate because I can't receive the reality of the forgiveness that He's offering me. Because I just can't believe that God can forgive me for that because I won't forgive somebody else for doing something to me that is less severe than what I've done to God. And so I can't live in the reality that I'm a chosen and a forgiven and adopted as a precious child of God. Because I've reinforced in my mind, you see, that there are certain things that are unforgivable. And certain relationships should die when someone does the unforgivable things. See, if I have a faith that cannot or will not forgive others as I myself have been forgiven, then my faith will die. That's why it's important to forgive other people. Because it's essential to maintain our relationships together, and it's essential for our faith. Now, I want to give a caveat today, because when I'm talking about forgiveness as essential, and it is, but when we're talking about forgiveness, it's easy for our minds to go to the most extreme situation in your life. And so if you're somebody who's suffered from some kind of abuse or a physical harm against somebody, and you're wondering in your head, Brendan, do I need to forgive that person? Because I don't know if I can. I'm not trying to minimize the harm that you've experienced by talking about the importance of forgiveness. Those extreme issues especially are complicated, and they've got all sorts of nuances that we can't totally talk about from the pulpit here today. And if you're struggling through what forgiveness looks like in that situation for you, I'd love to talk with you directly. Pastor Charles would love to talk with you directly about how to work through those kinds of struggles. Today, we're focusing on the forgiveness of our forgiving our friends and our family members, our neighbors, coworkers, our congregation members with us, relationships you have with people where continuing that relationship doesn't threaten your safety. It's the kind of forgiveness that we're covering today. So what is that forgiveness? What is that real forgiveness? What does it look like? And I'm not just talking about lip service today. I'm not talking about the thing that you know you should, and so you're going to say, you know what? You said I'm sorry, so it's all good. No worries. Don't worry about it. Those phrases are fine as long as you mean them. But if you're going to say it's fine, but it's really not fine, that's not forgiveness. And if you're saying it's fine, but I'm actually going to hold it over your head for the rest of your life, well, then that's not forgiveness. If you're saying it's fine, but yet I've got my ammo for the next fight that we have, and I'm going to bring it up and shoot it at you, that's not forgiveness either. And if it's fine, but I'm just going to ghost you and we'll just never talk again, that's not forgiveness. And forgiveness is not forgetting either. Forgive and forget, you've heard that phrase? That's not a real thing. Because we can't just develop some kind of selective amnesia about certain things that happen to us. And we can't expect ourselves or other people to just forget things that they've forgiven. But forgiveness it's a refusal to let an issue continue to affect the relationship. It's a refusal to let the issue continue to affect the relationships. It's a conscious choice to not let this thing that happened get in the way of our relationship together. And you might have some things in your mind that you're needing to forgive or that you have forgiven, and you're saying, Brendan, that's really hard to just not let this issue affect our relationship. And I'm saying, I know. remember, all of the burden of forgiveness is on the person doing the forgiving, and that's why it's hard. Forgiveness is releasing somebody from retribution and from a punishment that they deserve. It's a commitment to not intentionally deal some kind of emotional or relational damage and pain because of what you yourself have experienced. Now, that is true. But at the same time, this part doesn't mean that forgiveness removes all consequences, or that all consequences are canceled because of forgiveness. So, for example, if somebody commits murder and they're in jail, but the family of the victim says, "Hey, you know what? We've forgiven this person." That person doesn't get let out of jail. They still have to endure those consequences of that crime. Same thing with somebody who embezzles funds. They shouldn't go and be the church accountant or the church treasurer. Even though the congregation may have forgiven them, they don't want to put them in a place of more temptation. And there's still consequences for those actions, even though the church has forgiven them. Or somebody who commits an infidelity and a spouse forgives them. Or the person who's been forgiven doesn't get to go and say, "Hey, you need to trust me now because you've forgiven me." Because trust takes a long time to work towards and to build and to establish, and then it goes away and then it has to be re-established, and that takes a lot of time and work. See, these are very real consequences that exist in our life together on this side of eternity. But forgiveness means a commitment to repairing the relationship, not giving up on it, and working towards a full reconciliation. And the third thing forgiveness is based in, it's rooted in, it flows from the work of God in Jesus. All forgiveness is based on, rooted in, and flows from the work of God in Jesus. Forgiveness comes from God, and there is no true forgiveness apart from God. He gives us a perfect example of what perfect forgiveness looks like. And we heard it in our gospel reading today. Vicar Mark read it for us in the story of the prodigal son and his father, where the son, he goes to his dad and he says, "Hey, Dad, give me what's coming to me." And what he's asking for is his inheritance. But when the dad dies, this is what he would get. The son wants it before his dad has died. And in the ancient world, that didn't ever happen. Inheritance only got passed over when the person with the stuff dies, and then it gets divided up to his heirs. And so the son is basically saying, "Dad, you're worth more to me dead than you are alive. And you could go ahead and die already, but if you're not going to, then you might as well act like you're dead to me and give me your inheritance." Safe to say that ends the relationship. You don't come back from that. A father and a son don't keep talking and hanging out after you say something like that. And miraculously, the dad gives the son the inheritance, even though it's a crazy thing to ask for. And the son ends up squandering everything that he got in exchange for severing his relationship with his father, the son threw away and squandered. And so now he's living in this terrible kind of life, and he's broker than broke, and he's starving to death. And he wishes that, "You know what, in the first place, Dad, I wish you'd stop bringing this up. I wish I'd never come back in the first place." The dad doesn't make the son work back all that he'd squandered and lost in his inheritance, and he doesn't make him repay him for damages that he's done to him emotionally. The dad doesn't bring up the sin again. The dad forgives it. He restores the relationship, and then he celebrates the fact that the father and the son are together again. How can we forgive like that? How can we offer that kind of forgiveness to somebody else? I think there are a few things we need to keep in mind to forgive like the Father. The first is that our forgiveness flows out of our forgivenness. Our forgiveness flows out of our forgivenness. The story of perfect forgiveness is about what God has done for you. You have been the prodigal son. Your relationship with God has been dead, destroyed, cut off by sin that you've committed and by sin that you've inherited just by being a human being. And God is the Father to you. And He has welcomed you into His arms. He's resurrected your dead relationship with Him when He resurrected Jesus. Our forgiveness flows out of our forgivenness. You and I have been forgiven of so much. We know what's in our heart. We know what's in our minds. We know what we've done, even if nobody else does. We know exactly how much God has forgiven of us. We've got this perspective. And we've heaped junk in between us and God so that it's a blockade that we can never get past. And yet God has refused to let all of that junk that we've done against Him get in the way of a relationship with us. He's removed all of that. He's fought through it all so that He could have you, so He could have me. And this gives us a gratitude and a transformation of my heart and of my mind and of my attitude that comes from His mercy, and it flows to the people around us that we need to forgive. See, it's like I've been forgiven so much that I have to pass around that forgiveness to you. Our forgiveness flows from our forgivenness. Second thing is we need to be continuously forgiving. We need to be forgiving people who sin against you. Oftentimes it's going to be repeatedly forgiving the same sin. It doesn't mean that you need to expect them to commit the same sin over and over against you, but it means that you might have to, in your mind, forgive that sin that happened one time over and over and over and over again. Sometimes every day. Making a conscious choice, a conscious commitment to make the choice to forgive something. It's not a one and done kind of thing. I forgive you and now it's over in my brain. Because some sins cause wounds that take weeks or months or years of healing. Some scars that sin leaves are going to last until you die. And so we need to be renewing that commitment to ourselves, sometimes each and every day. And a need to forgive something more than once doesn't mean that the previous times you forgave it weren't real. Because sometimes we need to forgive again and again and again, so that the sin doesn't affect our relationship. Number 3, it may take your heart a while to catch up with your brain. It may take your heart a while to catch up with your brain. Expect your choice to forgive to come before your emotions. It may take your feelings a while to move past the anger and the hurt that you felt. Your decision to release somebody from a retribution or a punishment that they might deserve may come a long time before you actually feel like releasing them from that punishment. Because you know it's right for you. You know it's good for you. You're a redeemed child of God with the Holy Spirit living inside of you, and so you've made the choice to forgive. You've also got an old sinful self that's battling inside of you and wants to hold on to the anger and to the wound and to the grief. So your emotions might be dragged, kicking and screaming, into this new reality of forgiveness by the choice that you make to forgive. If you wait to forgive somebody until you feel like it, it'll never happen, and your relationship will die. But continuously choosing to forgive that person every day can eventually bring your emotions around to feeling what you've already chosen. It may take a while for your heart to catch up with your brain. Your emotions may need to catch up to your choice. And that's okay. We practice forgiveness because we've been forgiven. It may be hard to imagine God forgiving you all that needs to be forgiven of you, But he does. He already has. It's already been cast upon the cross. He's pronounced his forgiveness for you. It is true and it is real, even if your head gets in the way. And God pursues a relationship with you anyway. In Jesus, through baptism, through forgiveness, God resurrects his relationship with you. Even though he's got to shoulder all of the burden, even though we don't deserve it, God makes us his children. He forgives everything we've done to him, even when we can't imagine forgiving that of somebody else. He removed everything that had separated us from him because he wants this relationship. We are forgiven, and so we forgive. Even when it's hard, even though it doesn't come naturally to us, even though it means being vulnerable and admitting that we've been hurt by someone, even though it means giving power over to people who've wronged us, and even though it means refusing to deal out justice and to be repaid for something that's been done to us, we will pursue the example of perfect forgiveness. Because our forgiveness comes from our forgivenness. And we will be continuously forgiving, even if it means forgiving the same instance over and over again. And it may take our heart a while to catch up with our brain, and our emotions may come after our choice. We've been forgiven so much by our great God, and we extend that forgiveness to the people that we're in a relationship with. Because our relationships with each other and with God grow stronger when we forgive for real. In the name of Jesus, amen.